My first relationship, it was with a woman. I was so ashamed of being a lesbian that I hid her from everybody. She was the only person I'd felt safe with. I really cared for her.
Lorna Luxe is going Instagram viral sensation.
1.4 million followers.
John, my husband, he's 21 years older than me.
Because there's people that could see someone who's 20 years older and say, oh, look at this perverted old man. But there's others that quickly see stability, safety, and I believe that's what you saw.
And he always says, I knew from the day I met you that I was never letting this one go. He had cancer, and then in the midst of all this, he got diagnosed with a brain tumour. I'm watching someone fade away in front of my eyes. Every month, we're earning more money.
Can you disclose what a good month was for you?
I think at the high, I got paid
And already, my mind has been blown 3 times.
In my head, success meant being skinny. I developed a massive eating disorder when I was flying.
You were still cabin crew.
And I was getting weaker and weaker because I wasn't eating. And then I remember meeting with a doctor, and he was like, this is really worrying. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
I have a little surprise for you.
Oh, God. I've never spoken about this before. I probably shouldn't now, but I'll say it.
Just a quick one before we continue. We are so close. I mean, this close to hitting 200,000 subscribers. So first, if you have subscribed, thank you. And if you have not, why haven't you? No, please, 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 if you could subscribe. And here's the reason why. Because every subscription helps us to grow the channel, which allows us to continue bringing you more brilliant conversations. It's free. It takes only 2 seconds, and you can do it right here. You look perfectly matched color-wise.
I'll be honest, I did look at the studio a few times and look at what different people were wearing. And I thought, yeah, that will go with that.
I've noticed that certain guests will come and they'll say, I want to stand out.
Yeah, of course.
So they wear colors that make them pop.
Yeah.
What you've done is you've complemented.
Yeah, I'm blending in.
Yeah.
I wonder what that means.
What do you think that means?
I think I can be a bit of a chameleon generally to life and fit into pretty much any scenario. So maybe I do that with my fashion as well.
Okay.
Safer, right?
It could be. It could
I don't know.
Now, you just used a word that I believe could be a recurring word in this conversation. You know what that word is?
Go on, tell me.
Safety.
Yeah, I think it probably is.
Can we go back? Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Warrington, which is near Manchester, but not about an hour away.
Okay.
Nearer to Liverpool. But yeah, my first memory is not of being in Warrington, it's being in Sale in Manchester.
In Manchester.
So I can't remember anything about Warrington.
So when your first memory, you were how old?
Probably 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
My genuine first memory is of my dad, me chasing after my dad on the driveway of our house and him leaving and me crying saying, please don't go. And then cuddling my mum. And I just remember being really annoyed with him that he'd upset my mum and that we'd been effectively abandoned. And that sense of rejection has never left me in everything I've done since. So I really feel like that was a very important thing that happened to me that day. He was having an affair, and I kind of knew he was, because I don't have actual memories, but I just remember the feeling of being with him when he went to see his other girlfriend. But I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I've blocked it out. I don't know. But yeah, that impacts you, doesn't it? Because it's just a horrible thing to happen. Although now I look back as an adult and I get it. Like, maybe you weren't in love with my mum. Maybe you found this other person you love. But I just think he handled it so badly. And that's a shame on him, really.
It's one of those where I don't think that parents, or should I even say adults, realize the impact that their behavior has on children.
Massively. You're so impressionable, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, especially at 4 or 5, because we're forming our attachments. And you could be in a position where you were moving into what was considered a secure attachment. And then once one parent leaves,
Yeah.
You can move into more of a insecure attachment, and there's other challenges that could come up. So how do you believe that impacted you early on in life?
I think it probably made me feel vulnerable and not good enough because he'd gone somewhere better. And certainly because my mum couldn't afford to live where we lived on our own, we obviously moved out and moved to my grandparents. But he moved in to his new girlfriend's place, and that seemed to be much nicer than what we'd had originally. So I saw a man that was leaving me to go to somewhere better, and we were having to go somewhere less than. And I think there was a frustration that I didn't understand, that I almost kind of thought, well, yeah, I get it. Don't blame you. It's probably better over there. And I kind of almost apologised for him in a way and defended him to my mum. And I mean, I would see him. He used to come and take me out on Sundays. And he'd always be talking about his holidays that he'd been on with his girlfriend or his now wife and, all these lovely things. And that was quite hurtful. But I don't think I just think he had no self-awareness to realise how that hurtful that might be. And I think that as I've got older, I've deliberately forced myself to be more self-aware, to almost like overcompensate. So I don't like to, don't want to offend anyone or, almost become a bit people-pleasy, because I know that people can just drop you if you aren't good enough. And that's what my dad's kind of legacy is for me, I think.
Did you feel like you were not good enough?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I did. I don't think that as an adult, I don't look at him now with contempt or anything like that. I kind of understand that it was a difficult situation. But I don't think he really understands how much he let me down, when actually I was quite vulnerable and he had all the tools to fix it. And he chose not to. But genuinely, over my lifetime, people do that, right? They don't always, they have the tools to help or make a difference, and they choose not to. So it's almost taught me that you can't really rely on anyone. You have to kind of look after yourself a little bit.
So many children of parents who split up believe they are the reason.
Yeah, I think I did. And maybe I was, in a way.
Do you think
Because I think that he started his affair when my mum was pregnant. So maybe, not having that person just him. I mean, I will never know, and I'll take it to my grave. I'll always be wondering, because we've never had the conversation.
Yeah. Well, can I help to shed some light on that?
Yeah,
now?
go on.
Is that you were never the reason.
Okay.
You were never the reason. I know that without a doubt.
I hope not.
The child is never the reason, right?
Yeah.
For, when someone chooses to act out in poor behavior and hurt others, it is their issue.
Yeah, you're
right. And it stems from perhaps how they grew up, how they were socialized. But you were not. You were love.
Yeah.
You were a little girl, 4 years old.
Yeah, and I was genuinely quite kind of confident. And I think I lost a lot of confidence after that. So it really did. Now I look back, I'm like, I want to shake that child and be like, don't worry. It's not as bad as you think.
It's not as bad. It's interesting that you're talking about you lost confidence at that time, because I have a little surprise for you.
Do you? What are you going to show me?
Okay. And I want you to tell me
What is it?
what you see.
Okay.
Okay. Ready?
Oh, God. Who got you that?
So what are you looking at right now?
So this is me probably, I don't know how old I am there, maybe 6, in my nana and granddad's garden. Head to toe pink. Not probably that happy then. And I'd started to gain weight because I didn't play out. So I used to just sit with my granddad and eat. So I'd gone from being quite slim to I can see there that, I know it sounds awful, because most people would look at that picture and be like, it's just a cute little kid. But to me, that represents what then became my relationship with food.
Interesting.
And how that wasn't a good thing. God, that's such an old picture.
You just mentioned that you didn't like playing out.
No, I didn't.
So why not?
Because when we'd moved to my nan and granddad's, it was on a council estate. And I didn't realise that I'd developed this kind of voice that the kids on the estate thought was posh. And they thought that I was better than I was. So there was a bit of bullying. And if I took my bike around, like, you could drive around in a circle, the houses. I remember a couple of times kids, like, trying to knock me off my bike and stuff. So I was like, I'm not getting into that. I wasn't a kind of confrontational kind of person. So I just used to stay in the house.
Okay. Who and where did you feel safe in that time of your life? Was it with...
Yeah, at home with Nana and Grandad and my mum.
Okay.
But mum was working and Nana and Grandad didn't. They'd retired. And they were just dead nice, like nice people. Very cute.
So now, in those early years as well, what about relationships? At what age do you feel like you had your first boyfriend?
I had my first boyfriend at 17 and I worked at Curry's, which is like, an electrical store. And there was a lot of guys because obviously boys love electrics, don't they?
Sure.
And so I really liked that. And I liked the dynamic of men and how you could kind of, women are very difficult to manipulate in some ways and men are very kind of easy to in other ways. And I loved that dynamic because I never had it because all my kind of friends growing up were girls.
Interesting. So what were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of the manipulation of men, the ease of manipulation of men?
I think just the ability to get out of doing stuff by just being cute and then wanting to help you and do stuff for you.
Uh-huh.
And that's really powerful. And I really harnessed that when I went to uni. The first year of uni, I wasn't very good at adulting. So I didn't know how to eat properly. And I didn't know how to not get drunk. And so I put on a lot of weight in my first year at uni.
Interesting.
And what I recognised was that my flatmates, that were all very pretty girls, slim girls, were getting all these boys and all this attention. And I wanted that. So then when I came back for the second year, I'd been dieting over the summer. And then it kind of changed the game for me in a way and gave me a confidence that I'd not had before as a woman rather than a girl.
Mm. So you got more attention.
Got more attention. And I liked it.
And you equated that to weight.
Yeah, and how I looked. Yeah, I did actually. Like my value came from how I looked and not my personality.
Okay. So once you got that attention coming back, because you had slimmed down, did you do anything else with regards?
Yeah, I straightened my hair. I used to have curly hair and I straightened it. I had a bit of a mini glow up, I'd say.
Mini glow up, all right. So who did you become at university?
I think I became a woman as opposed to a girl. And I was fighting a lot of conflicting thoughts around that time. I've never spoken about this before. I probably shouldn't now, but I'll say it. My first kind of major relationship at university was with a woman. And I was so ashamed of, being a lesbian that I hid her from my friends and everybody for, a couple of years. And my flatmate never knew. I don't think she knew anyway. I really cared for her. And I kind of screwed it up because of being afraid to be who I want to be.
Sure.
And she got sick of it in the end. And she sacked me off. Fair play to her. And, we're still friends now. But I understand why she did that. At the time, I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was it was a real important thing to happen to me. Because it wasn't about being gay or straight or whatever you want to label it. It was about the fact that I was somebody that could connect with anyone if they would, you know what I mean? I didn't define myself even at that age.
Yes.
And that set the ball rolling for how my relationships would play out when I kind of grew up. And I do remember thinking, certainly when I got my job at Virgin, what am I going to be now? Because I can reinvent myself and I can embrace me because no one knows me.
Interesting.
And so I did, really.
Really? So why Virgin? Why cabin crew? Why did you decide that path?
That was more kind of, there was a financial issue that I knew I had to go home after uni and I didn't have a job to go to. And I'd seen on the back of a Cosmopolitan magazine this ad for Virgin Atlantic. And I was like, she looks really good in her uniform and that's cute. I want to be that person. And so I applied and got an interview. This was back in the day where they would like weigh you and try the uniform on you to see if you look nice. And
Really? Really?
It was really, we're going back to like early 2000s.
My mother was cabin
Yeah.
crew for an airline that's no longer in existence. But what I distinctly remember was how glamorous my mother
So glam.
looked and her friends. It was, and quite honestly, my mother before that she was a model.
Right, okay.
So it was, I mean, I'm talking about it was high end glamour.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like that attracted
I
you.
loved that. I wanted a job that people would be like, oh, she does that.
Yes.
And I didn't really have any other skills. So I was like, that's actually quite a good job for me.
Okay.
It really helped me at that age, at 21. It gave me a new identity. And I very much embraced it. I remember going home on the train. They'd given us crew tags, and I had the crew tag like casually like on my bag so that people could see I was Virgin Crew. I was so proud. And like any institution, I suppose, you become really proud of the uniform, don't you?
Yes.
And I met some girls on my training course. So we moved to Brighton. I remember the girls I lived with, one of them being like, so she had a job on the side. She was a lap dancer on her days off. And she'd met this very hot guy or whatever. And she set me up kind of on a bit of a blindish date with this guy who I did end up dating.
Okay. And how did you find that experience?
Well, I felt like I fitted in with my friends again. And I quite liked that. So I was dating someone he was an athlete, he was a professional sportsman with a public profile and, people knew him. So it was almost like credibility. It gave me street cred.
Yeah.
To date someone that was semi-famous. And he wasn't right for me either, but I couldn't see that at the time.
You know what I find so interesting about that, though, is the first response when I asked you, how did you find that experience, was that you basically, or not you, basically you said it allowed you to fit in with your friends.
Yeah, it did.
So it was the utility.
It was a vehicle
Yes.
for what I needed at the time. And it was great in that sense. But was I emotionally fulfilled? Not really.
Not at all.
I think what it made me realise was that I wasn't necessarily attracted to a man or a woman. I was attracted to the person. So I've had 2 relationships in my life where I felt that connection to the person.
Mm.
And I think, and one's been a man, one's been a woman. But I think the other people I was dating was just to try and tick a box or fill a gap or fill a void.
Sure.
And I certainly hung a lot of my identity on dating this sportsman because everyone loved it. And it was, when I was crew on flights, they'd ask me what my boyfriend did and I could show off about him.
Mm.
And so when that relationship ended, I felt like I did when my dad left at 4. Like almost he'd taken away he'd almost like just turned everything upside down and ruined it all. We had this, good thing and you've just spoiled it.
Yeah.
But I wasn't that bothered about losing him. It was what he represented. And I quickly jumped from, obviously after splitting up with him, my next relationship was my now husband.
Wow. This is a relationship that people have questions, but I think that it's important to clarify these questions because it speaks to this idea of not living by this script.
Yeah, definitely.
That we're being handed. And I see that. I didn't realize this was going to be a common theme, but that is a common theme here, is that you live off the beaten path.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But where I'd love to go back to is Virgin, being cabin crew at Virgin. That was a training ground for many things in your life, leadership, entrepreneurship, etc. So when it came to what you learned around that first class, though,
Yeah.
what I'm super curious by that is what was it? Because I see it all the time. first class is incredibly expensive.
Yeah, it's so expensive.
I mean, incredibly expensive. So on average, a ticket, what would you say a ticket if you're paying full price first class from London to New York is what?
I mean, probably from $6,000 onwards, right?
Right.
Could get daft if you booked it last minute.
10,000,
Yeah.
12,000. So who's buying this? What are they doing? What are their careers?
So I'm a bit of a chatterbox. So I would chat to all my punters when I was working in upper class. And I actually, it took me 4 years to get promoted to work in the posh bit. I was like, they called it like a Jurassic Junior, because I was junior crew for so long, because I wasn't really like someone that was eager to get promoted. I just quite enjoyed going out and partying when I was on the trips. And then when I finally did get promoted, I made the effort to really chat to the customers. And we would get maybe 14, 15 each to look after.
Okay.
And I'd say that there was a defining type of person that was sat in that seat.
Interesting.
It was either a businessman or a businesswoman that hadn't paid for their own ticket and was just working, and that's what they'd been booked on. It was a fabulous celebrity, or someone that was known, and for them I had no idea how they'd got that ticket. And then there was also a lot of people that use miles and are smart and travel a lot, and therefore they were maybe on their holidays, but they were using all their business miles that they'd acquired over the year.
Okay.
You can always tell. I always felt like you could spot who'd been upgraded versus who hadn't, and they might be a bit uncomfortable and a bit like looking around. And I always identify with those people because that'd be me, right? I'd be the one getting upgraded. So I enjoyed that. I loved being I loved customer service. Like, I really think it's quite it's a lovely job to have, because you can make or break their day, basically.
Yes.
You're kind of in charge of their destiny in some ways. So it feels quite empowering. And I really enjoyed it. And I love meeting new people. So it was a great job. Like, I loved that job.
Just a heads up before we continue. Lorna and I discuss eating disorders. If this is a sensitive topic for you, please watch with care. Did you always feel like it was family? Or were there any moments where you felt like you were ostracized a little bit or off on your own?
I offed on my own myself. I developed a massive eating disorder when I was flying.
While you were flying?
I think initially it was just bulimia, which I felt that we were drinking a lot, it was eating at night time on night flights. You'd do a night flight home from Orlando, you've served everyone their chicken nuggets and chips or whatever, and beef and chicken, and then there'd be loads of meals left in the oven, you just eat them. But actually it was an extra meal to what you would have needed. So I'd put on a bit of weight, and I knew that I had to be a virgin girl and slim and whatnot. So I thought, I can just eat and then I'll chuck it up later. So I became a real purger. I wasn't kind of force feeding. I was just managing my way through that.
Through purging?
Through purging.
Okay.
And then I quickly kind of cottoned on that I can maybe undereat a little bit and maybe go to the gym a few more times. So my trips, my destinations were changing because I was selecting, rather than going to Shanghai and going shopping for, gorgeous things, I'd rather go, to New York for one night and stay in the Holiday Inn where I could use the gym, and no one's going to question where you are in New York, right? You could just go anywhere. Oh, I just went and met a friend, or it didn't have to be too social. Whereas you're going to stick with your crew, right? When you're in China or India or somewhere where you don't speak the language.
Right.
You're going to all stick together. So I changed I just changed my lifestyle effectively and became really singular.
So you were literally selecting destinations.
Yeah, to hide my eating.
To hide your eating.
And to hide my training because I was exercising.
Okay.
And it just got worse and worse. But I remember the trigger point for me where it was like, right, this has got to stop. I'd picked up it was a trip. It was one night Antigua, one night Grenada. Did the Antigua part of the trip. It was good crew, very sweet. I'd been to the gym. I felt good. I didn't have to meet anyone. And then we had to do a shuttle the next day to Grenada. So we shuttled to Grenada, and then the ash cloud meant that all planes were grounded. And so I was meant to have like one night in Grenada and fly home, but 2 weeks later, we're still there. And I'm, washing my knickers in the sink. And I used to exist on these like meal replacement bars, chocolate bars. It's like calories. I only had like 5 days worth of these chocolate bars. So I was making these bars last.
Wow.
And I was getting weaker and weaker because I wasn't eating. And I was out of control. And that was really the catalyst for me telling my manager at Virgin that I wasn't well. And I think after that flight, I don't think I did any more flights after that. That was like my last flight. And then they grounded me. But I was so poorly and I just couldn't see the wood for the trees. I just could not reason. Because in my head, success meant being skinny. And the skinnier I got, it was like I'd found the secret sauce. I thought I was great. It's like all these people don't get it and I get it.
Right.
I know how to be skinny and these people don't. I'd fixated on this achievement that was really so harmful.
But did you feel as if telling the manager would give you just a few days off? Because I'm sure you didn't think that you would lose your job.
No, I didn't. I thought, I'll get like a couple of weeks off maybe, and they might send me to HR and occupational health. And then I remember meeting with a doctor that John had organised for me to meet, and he said, I'm signing you off for a month, but you're going to need longer than that. I was like, what? No, I'll be fine. And he was like, no. He was like, this is really worrying. And I was very underweight, and I just couldn't. I didn't really believe it. I didn't, even when I was seeing, I went to the Priory, they were telling me how ill I was. They wouldn't let me go to the toilet on my own. They wouldn't let me overeat either. They were like, you're so frail and skinny that you can't overeat because it could shock your body. Wow. And I was like, this is like something out of a dystopian novel. And that's really, as soon as I kind of met with doctors and they told me everything, I really realised how serious it was.
Yes.
And then they kind of said, we can only treat you if you stay in the Priory. If you can't be an outpatient. And they sent me and John home to get my bags and stuff. And we pulled up outside the house and I said to John, if you make me go back, I'll do it. But the marriage is over. We're done. The trust is gone. And so he said, right, well, you're not going. And I said, I promise you, I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try my hardest. I promise you. And we went to what is Zzz's in Brighton. And I ordered a lasagna. And I ate a quarter of a lasagna in front of him. Which was a lot of food for me then.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it was just really, I don't know how we got through those years, if I'm honest, because it's not, recovery isn't like, you don't just do it in a few months.
No.
This took like years. Never really going to be recovered. But I just remember feeling like I've got to take charge of this because I was losing control. And for so long, I'd had this control over my body and my weight.
Yes.
And maybe the job allowed that a little bit because as much as it was a family, you never flew with the same people. So it wasn't like an office job where people check in you. They know you day to day. They're like, babes, what are you doing there? I could pretty much kind of just be anonymous and fly under the radar. And that's how I think it allowed me to become so poorly.
Yes. Yes. Can we even go deeper on your eating disorder?
Yeah.
Because, it was in the research that I was doing for this conversation that I stumbled upon something that was mind-blowing to me. And that is that eating disorders, in particular anorexia, has one of the highest mortality rates among mental illnesses.
Yeah.
Right. I did not know. And I didn't fully understand the complexity of eating disorders, right? Where they stem from and how they're exacerbated. So when you think back, were you ever specifically treated for your anorexia?
I was.
Okay.
I got a therapist.
Okay.
And she was good. And she really wanted to unpick my dad. I remember that. And she called it like pulling out drawers. And I actually got iller after having therapy at the beginning. The trauma of going through everything made me a bit worse. And then I kind of developed some skills to kind of manage what I was doing. A lot of my recovery has been through the gentleness of John and my mum and my family and friends, but also my own determination to just get over it.
Yes.
And for me, that's been about having control over something else. So I always understood I've got to be in control of something. And it couldn't always be my weight.
Yeah. And this is what I find interesting is that many people see eating disorder and they think it's about food, but it's not about food.
No.
It's about safety. It's about identity.
Yeah.
And it's about emotional control.
It really is.
Yeah.
And actually, my eating disorder, when I look back, I can trace back the first beginnings of being obsessed with training and under eating happened around the time that my boyfriend had left me and I'd just met John. And John always has blamed himself and always said, no, you pretty much had an eating disorder from the day we met and it's my fault. I allowed that. And I'm like, no. You kind of like saved me because all that trauma was before I met you.
Right.
And then it kind of played out in this, what was a really, distressing period for him as well.
Yeah. Because it weights on, right, not just you,
Yeah.
but all of those around you.
Everyone's worried and it was just, I wouldn't wish it on, my worst enemy. It's a horrible disease to have. And there's an embarrassment, right? There's a bit of shame in there as well because, mental health and anything with the word mental in it has a negative connotation. So you don't want to admit to having a poor mental health.
Right.
What will people think? Will they think less of me or that I'm not as reliable or, I'm not someone to be relied upon? And I still, I talk about my eating disorder very rarely now online. But when I do, I feel like I have to really be careful what I say, the wording, because things are so triggering. And anyone that, if somebody's listening to this that is in the depths of an eating disorder, they'll probably be listening and maybe acknowledging what I'm saying, but they're not going to necessarily take it on board.
Right.
They're like, that's that person, but that's not me. I'm not that bad. Which is scary, right?
It is. 1.25 million people in the UK.
Okay. It's a lot of people.
Have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
All right. Roughly 9% of people in the US will have an eating disorder in their lifetime.
Wow.
And that equates to roughly 30 million people. An eating disorder is a mental health condition where you use the control of food to cope with feelings and other situations.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point, it is a control mechanism. It's a coping mechanism, but it becomes exacerbated in our life based on certain moments. So when you think throughout your life, can you see the moments where, and what were those moments? Because I think this is helpful for people who are watching or listening.
Probably my first realization about controlling food was seeing my mum doing Slim Fast when we'd moved into Nan and Grandad's because she wanted to be slimmer and I don't know, maybe she was looking for a new boyfriend, I don't know. So there was I could see that a relationship between the way you look and food, and so she was controlling her diet. And so I would overeat, right? As a kid, I overate because it was comfort. But then when I realised that people judge you on how I looked, I had to then undereat. And there's something about being in control of what goes in your body that no one else can take control of. It's the one thing really, right? No one else can really impact. So at every point in my life where I felt very anxious, when my ex-boyfriend left me, when even crazy things like, as an influencer, but I've been trolled before and I've immediately gone and purged.
Wow.
Because there's that immediacy of like, right, I just need to just release. And it feels like a release. It's quite an addictive feeling. So food will always be something that I just use, it's not a crutch as such, but I think I'm not someone that doesn't think about what they're eating. But because I'm feeling empowered with my job, all right, there's a lot of worry at the minute with John, but because work is, it's going well, I'm working really hard, I can put all the control into that. And then I'm just eating food as fuel. But I can see how if I lost John or if something majorly traumatic happened to me, I could be very vulnerable to going downhill very fast. because it would take hold very quickly because I think I would just allow it. So I do have to kind of check myself. And I fluctuate in weight, and all my friends worry about me and my eating. And John really is the guy that keeps me in check. So not having him around at the minute, that's I think my mum worries for me in that sense.
Yes.
Because she's like, you've not got your person just keeping an eye on you. And yeah, just going back to your question, that little traumas that are almost like PTSD of that moment when I was a kid. Anything that makes me feel the same way, like, oh, I'm losing control, I can't control this, I'm being rejected, or that's when it comes out for me.
Yes.
But I would say that that's why this career that I've got now has been so good, because the feeling of having, like the first feeling of growing on Instagram back in the day, created the same excitement, endorphins, and like that feeling valuable and part of a team that I had when I got my job at Virgin. It was like I'm accepted, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're wanted, yeah.
And then you crave it then, right? So you're chasing, so I'm still chasing it, I imagine.
Yes.
The same feelings. And what if it ends? Like, what if tomorrow, I get cancelled, or people don't like me anymore and I'm not interested? Will it be like Virgin, where I'm so defined by my status and my job that what will I do next?
Yeah. That's why it's so important to discover internal validation.
Yeah, it is.
Because as long as we are reliant on external, it means that there will be an expiration. It will go away.
Yeah.
It always does. But the internal source never does.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to create that internal, validation, because it's a validation system. It's very hard.
Really hard.
And different therapists use different tools, from journaling to manifesting to continually, self-love techniques, etc. But ultimately, I feel like we all need to find those things, because the more reliant we are on external validation, the more susceptible we are to going down that slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see now that I'm quite vulnerable in that sense then, because I do think that if I were to lose John, he's really my only home, if you like. And then all my other validations are coming from external sources.
Yes.
Which is quite a scary place to be.
Yeah.
And probably something I need to work on.
Yeah, definitely. And even there are even some tools I can share with you as well, after this. But absolutely, because you mentioned this earlier too, and this is absolutely fact, is that anorexia and other forms of eating disorders, typically it's something that we have for life.
Yeah, I know that.
It's something that we have for life, and it's something that we have to learn how to manage.
Yeah.
And typically it's not defeated for good, but it is, but you can win the war, but that you'll always have to battle it.
Gotcha. I like that.
Yeah. And you will win the war. You're winning the war.
I really am. And I do sometimes think, I've done all right there to keep that at bay.
Yes.
But it's a very addictive disease, I would say. So it's a comfort blanket when everything's going wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes nothing's going wrong, but it's just how it feels, like it's optics, it's perception, and how it feels to me.
Yes.
That perfectionism of wanting things to be the best.
Yeah, and it gives you the control.
Gives me so much control, and it doesn't rely on anyone else. It's just my own little thing.
There you go. And for someone who was a little girl, you could see that you didn't have that.
No, I didn't.
You didn't have control over that scenario, that situation. You placed the blame on yourself.
Yeah.
So to have now something that you can control entirely, right? That's the reason why it persists.
Yeah, you're right.
Can we talk about John?
Yeah.
Because there's so many. Let's talk about how you met John. Because I saw a video with John describing how he met you.
Really?
Yes.
must have seen this video.
Yes. Well, technically, you were in
Was
the
I
video.
in it? Yeah.
Yeah, you were in the video. But meeting John, what was that moment when you met him? Because you were still at
I
Virgin.
was still at Virgin.
Okay.
And I'd done a 4-night Antigua. And I really liked the crew on that trip. And I remember there was a guy on the crew who was he'd been there quite a long time. He's a bit older. And he was like, oh, I'll set you up with one of my mates. Like, you're going to be fine. You don't need to date that sports guy. He was a cricketer, and this guy loved cricket.
Okay.
And so when I told him I'd split up with this guy, he was like, oh, well, he was rubbish at cricket anyway, so you're better off without him. And I thought, I like you. You're a good guy. And so that Saturday, that weekend, when we got back from Antigua, me and a couple of the girls on that flight decided to go out in Brighton. And we went into a bar, and I spotted the guy that was on the flight. Not planned. He just happened to be there as well.
Okay.
And he was with John. That was his friend. And the story, as John says, is that he saw me walk in the bar, and he was like, I couldn't take my eyes off you. And so I said to my mate said he knew me. And so he said to Steve, can you introduce me to that girl? And so he said, yeah, come on, we'll go and chat to them. And I couldn't understand why this guy was just talking at me. And he was going through a divorce. So he was talking sort of trauma dumping and really offloading. I was like, oh my God. But very sweet. And then we went to a nightclub and they kind of hung on. We were like, we're going to go to the club now. And they were like, okay, well, we'll come. And I remember having about 60 quid left in my bank account. And I said to John and the other guys, I was like, oh, can I get you a drink? And I don't think John heard what I said. So I just went and got them drinks. And then when I brought the drinks back, it was like 40 quid. So I was like, I've only got 20 quid left now for the rest till Monday. And I remember him saying, oh, you didn't have to buy me a drink. And I was like, oh, no, I wanted to. And I think he was really touched by that. And so he said, can I have your number? And I was like, no, but I'll have yours. And then that very night when I got in, I texted him and just said, it was lovely to meet you. And that was kind of how we met.
Look at that. Look at that. And then what happened next? Because I think that's the part in everyone's romance story that we want to hear. Because that was beautiful.
Yeah, that was cute.
That was cute. That was cute. That was cute. But then what happened next?
Yeah.
How does the relationship actually form?
So he was quick on the texts.
Okay.
And so once he had my number, he asked me out on a date. He gave me options, which I now realise is a very John thing to do. It's not because he's not confident. He's just, these are your options. So the text message was so long, it was like an essay.
Okay.
And I remember just replying back, Browns, 7 p.m. And that was it, kind of thing.
So he gave you options, different restaurants.
Yeah, and I was being cool and whatever. And I liked that he was over keen. And I remember I arrived early, but he'd already been there an hour waiting. And he'd got a bottle of wine, not a glass. And I liked that. I was like, this guy's confident. And he's older. He's 21 years older. Mm-hmm. So he had an innate confidence about him that I just really was attracted to. And he was very kind. I mean, that's the takeaway from anyone that meets John. He's just genuinely kind. And we just got into this rhythm of dating. And every date, we would always go back to his place for a nightcap. And I would never stay over. But when I left, there would always be a gift. He'd always gone to somewhere, like he went to Space NK or he went to, L'Occitane or wherever. And he'd always get me some kind of beauty or skincare goodies in a little bag.
Wow.
And this went on for weeks. And also, the cab back to his was 8 quid from Kemp Town to Hove.
Oh, my goodness.
But he always gave me £20 note when I got in the cab. So he was almost like taking care of me. And me and the girls I was friends with there in Hove used to laugh and be like, you're always 12 quid up on a date with him. And at first I just thought, oh yeah, I'm just dating this older guy. Like, it's a bit of fun, like kind of thing. I'm not really, it's not going to go anywhere. But then slowly I really started to like him. And I was like, well, actually, I do quite like this guy. And this was obviously fresh off the back of me splitting up with my ex-boyfriend. So I was looking for somewhere new to live. And he was going through a divorce, so he was looking for somewhere to live. And so I would go house hunting with him, and he was looking at these extravagant, beautiful places. And then he'd come with me looking for these rentals that were like really bad. And then one day he just said, why don't we just buy together and I'll get...
Now how long had you been
seeing
each other?
3 months.
3 months, okay.
And he was like, but I'll get my lawyer to put into writing that you can just, if you want to walk away at any moment, you can just take your money. And it's cool. I respect that. And any equity that's in the property. And I was like, well, this is a good deal. And his lawyer as well was a bit like, John, why are you doing this? And so so then that was it. So I remember I expressly told him that when I bought my old flat with my ex-boyfriend, that was my dream road. I loved that road. And I was gutted that I was having to move out and move somewhere else. So he found a really beautiful apartment on this road. And he took me to see it. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And he was like, good, because I've just made an offer. Should we buy it? And so he kind of bought my dream home. Wow. He wasn't playing games.
I'd say he was not playing.
He was like,
fellas, take notes. He was not
he
playing.
wasn't. And he always says, like, I knew from the day I met you that you were it for me, that I was never letting this one go. And he was just so determined, which I really respect and admire. But for, I think, a lot of people, like, until my mum met him, she was worried. Like, she's listening to these stories down the phone. She's up in Manchester. And she's like, who's this guy? And like, I need to meet him. And then when she met him, she understood.
Sure. But you know how, so it's interesting because I can empathize and sympathize with how John moved.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have those resources, but that's how I moved with my wife.
Yeah.
Very intentional, not playing around.
No.
I want to express how serious I am. And I felt like I was in love day one.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like that's exactly where John was.
Oh, he totally was.
But for a lot of people, they'll enter a relationship with someone who is love bombing them, you know, it coming from a nefarious position. So how did you know what John, you know, what he was doing? How did you know that was authentic, that it wasn't an act?
I didn't give it too much thought. I just really trusted him straight away and felt very safe with him. His brother is epileptic and is a year older than him, but has pretty much lived in an institution or a care home since he's been a kid. And the care that he showed his brother, like, blew my mind. And that empathy he has for his brother, I think has made him into the man he is today. So he's got a naturally caring way about him.
Okay.
And always wanting he'll do anything for anyone. He'll give anyone anything he's got. And I liked that because I really saw that was quite an admirable trait to have.
Okay.
And it made me feel good to be with someone like that.
Yes.
That was just really quite a nice person.
I like that word that you used immediately. I felt safe with him.
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
And he would just protect me from everything. And I felt like this guy's just going to look after me. And this is a solid person.
Yes.
And, you know, we quickly got engaged and quickly got married.
How long?
I think in total 1.5 years from meeting to getting married.
Okay, that is quick.
Yeah.
That's quick. Were there concerns from any friends or family members at all?
No, I think I didn't have massive family, and everyone that had met him seemed to really like him. My friends, they were just quite self-focused at that period. They were people that had their own lives going on, their own issues, quite dramatic. I had quite a dramatic group of friends. Yeah. So they weren't really bothered. You know, they were looking forward to the party. The wedding was going to be good, right? So they liked, and also John was very generous. So, you know, they enjoyed being around John.
Sure.
You know, he'd pay for everyone's dinners and there was always champagne in our fridge. So it was always, you know, we were a solid friendship to have.
Yes.
And yeah, no one really expressed any concern. I think his dad a little bit did. And his dad's wife pretty much said to me, you shouldn't do this. You're not thinking this through. She was kind of keen to dissuade me. And I think maybe that came from experience because she was married to his dad and she was the same age gap.
Oh, 21 years.
I think about that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think she was trying to say, look, you know, it's great. It's all hunky-dory now when you're 25 and he's 46. But wait until, you know, you're 60 and he's 80. There'll be a big difference.
Yes.
And that's what she was in. And I couldn't really understand that. And I still can't, to be honest.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting about that is that there is research to suggest this, something like this. And what the research shows is that where you see a large age gap, so 10 years or more in either direction, what you see is much higher satisfaction in the early stages of the relationship.
Yeah.
You know, it's not to say that the satisfaction level goes down, but it just goes to show that the satisfaction in the early stages is higher than if there's no age gap.
I think because you're teaching each other things, right? And he said I made him feel alive,
Right.
and there was excitement, and I used to take him away on lots of trips. He loved my lifestyle, and he in turn made me feel really safe, really cherished and loved, and genuinely gave me the breathing space to try and figure out what I want to do in my life. And certainly, obviously, I was battling an eating disorder,
Right.
but alongside that, I was also growing as a woman and growing in confidence, and he encouraged all of that.
Yes.
And it wasn't, you can't do this or you can't. He just wanted to help me do whatever I wanted to do.
Yes. Now, so at that time when you got married, how old were you?
So I was 20. I got married on my 26th birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were 26. So he was
47.
47.
Yeah.
All right. 26, 47. Now, at that point, were you online at that point or no?
I was on Facebook.
You were on Facebook. So there was no one saying, look at this age gap.
There was no one.
No one. Okay.
No one critical about that relationship.
Okay. And you felt like it didn't matter because you're with someone who you love.
I had reservations in terms of I'd never, other than my nana and granddad, I'd never really seen a marriage last. And I remember my bridesmaid saying to me outside the door before we went in, she said to me, well, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you can just get divorced. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not really worried. And in my head, and I've told John this before, that's how I approached it. I didn't see it as a lifelong commitment the way he did. I saw it as well, this will do for now, and it really suits me, and I really love him. But if that things change, it's fine. And it's only as I've been married longer and longer, I recognise that actually that was a stupid thing to think.
That's interesting.
And it doesn't make any sense.
This is so interesting to me because I believe that more and more people view marriage as you viewed it going in. And that is that this thing that we have is disposable. So
Yeah.
we can walk into it and we can walk out, right?
It was like a mortgage. I found it harder to get out of a mortgage in the way I looked at it.
Yeah. But then there's other people. It sounds like this is how John thought. Sounds like his thought was this is it.
Yeah, he did.
Now you mentioned that he had gone through a divorce, so he was married
Yeah.
previously.
Twice before, yeah.
Twice before.
Yeah.
So walking into this one, your thought is that he believed this was it. He was not going to be married again.
He always said to me, I've never been in love before. I promise you that. And I believe him. Or at least the love he experienced with me, he'd never felt before. So I never felt as though it was, for him, he likes wedding cake, it's just another jolly. I really did believe he was committed to me fully. And I liked that feeling.
Yes.
There's something really lovely about having loyalty and that person that's never going to drop you. I'm never going to be chasing after John down the driveway. He's always going to be there for me. And I thought I could see how important that was, and that's what I needed.
Yeah. You just mentioned you'll never have to chase him down the driveway like you did your father.
Yeah.
Do you see any connection between your father walking out when you were 4 and your feeling of comfort with John being 21 years older than you? Do you see any connection?
I actually see more of a connection with John and my granddad.
Okay.
Because my granddad was that saving person that cuddled me when everything was going wrong, and I would sit and eat, rubbish food with in the evenings and watch snooker and crap telly. So he was my comfort. And when I met John, I always thought, because granddad had died by the time I met John, but I always thought, you're a lot like my granddad. You've got a similar personality.
Yes.
Calm, like very stoic, very reliable and charismatic.
Yes.
He ticked all those boxes for me.
Yes.
And even my mum has said I can see, those similarities. And so I never put him in the realm of my dad. If anything, my ex-boyfriend reminded me of my dad. There definitely must be daddy issues going on here, but I've always kind of like kept them away from John because I don't want to spoil what I have, because we've had it for so long as well now.
Yeah.
I don't want to ever think badly of John, or because it won't be him, it'll be me. But I don't want to tarnish what is a really good relationship.
Yeah. Now, I mean, clearly, you have love.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We absolutely love each other
you,
to bits.
you have love, and you know what's even interesting too is that you know, I think that you could read a lot about someone based on the images that they post
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
I truly do. Even though we're all trying to present the best representation of ourselves, I think there's certain things that you could read into someone's profile. And it's interesting because my wife and I, we were going through yours. We did this long stalk of yours. And I said, you know, one thing is clear. She loves him
Yeah, of course.
and he loves her.
Yeah.
And I said, and that there is no question.
No, there isn't.
There's no question. And but I when I think about your story, I think there is a parallel between John and your father. And I'll tell you this is that there's a researcher, her name is Dr. Margot Main.
Okay.
She has a theory called father hunger.
Oh God, I know where this is going.
Have you ever heard of this theory?
I haven't, but just those two words together,
Where do you think I'm going with this?
that craving for the perfect dad, right?
So it's not the craving for the perfect dad, but it is specifically when a father has abandoned his family,
Yeah.
typically before the age of what? 5.
Okay.
The child craves safety, emotional connection, stability. And if when the father leaves and that doesn't happen, they spend the rest of their life in search of that.
Yeah.
And typically they end up meeting someone who's much older,
Oh God.
10, 15, 21 years. And immediately what they see in that person is different. Because there's other people that could see someone who's 20 years older and say, oh, look at this icky old man, you know, this perverted old man.
Yeah.
But there's others that quickly see stability, safety,
Yeah.
structure. And I believe that's what you saw very quickly.
I totally did.
Yeah.
And I loved those things. I mean, obviously, I fancied him. He was a good-looking guy. We had a lot in common.
Yes.
Like, we love the same art. We love the same jokes. Do you know what I mean? We finish each other's sentences. He has his own language that only I can understand. So there's that, but a lot of that's built, right, over time. But there was an initial moment of, I felt immediately, this is perfect. This is what I need right now. Because it's not been the best couple of years. But I would do that all over again. Like, that's one relationship that I would, you know what I mean? If I was given lots of different avenues, I would always do the same thing.
Yes. Why not? I mean, it goes to show that when we go through trauma in our lives, that there's a silver lining cloud to it.
Yeah.
There's a blessing that could come from it. And the blessing for you was that you've met the love of your life.
Yeah.
You know, who you may not have maybe formed as quick connection with if it wasn't for that trauma.
True.
That you had.
That's a nice way of spinning it.
Yeah. Look, we have a lot of reality TV stars on We Need to Talk, and I'm always talking to them after the recording about what's happening in their lives. And you know what always comes up is that they all are building their own businesses. They are their own brands. And what amazes me most is between filming, interviews, events, and creating content, they actually have the time to run a business too. But when I ask how they do it, almost everyone gives the same answer. They're using Shopify, which also happens to be a sponsor of this show. You probably know Shopify as the platform that helps you sell products around the world, managing things like shipping, inventory, and returns. But what I didn't know is how much more it can do. Shopify's AI integration writes copy, enhances photos, and even creates campaigns. If you're starting your own business and need extra help, visit shopify.co.uk/need to talk to sign up for your £1 per month trial.
I was talking with your show sponsor, Tinder, and they wanted to know if you've ever been on a date that ended up in an unexpected way. Do you have anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. Endless stories. I mean, one in particular is that when Jill and I were dating, we went to a slam poetry competition, which I will say I knew nothing about slam poetry. And that's when I learned that you snap your fingers, right, when you applaud. I specifically went there because I wanted to impress Jill so that I can get a little, I'll say, bonus afterwards, you know. But what I learned through one of the poets is that we are all artists. The poet specifically said we are all artists. And that triggered something in me. It made me click to the point where I realized that I wanted to create. I wanted to figure out how to do that. So afterwards, we went out to eat, Jill and I, and we started talking about creating art together. And I learned from that date that, you know, the date isn't just about the other person. It's not about your physical pleasure. It's not about their physical pleasure. It's about what you can learn about life, about yourself. It was an unexpected outcome from a date. So wherever a date may lead, it starts with a swipe. That's why you need to download Tinder. Now, you mentioned that you didn't have children.
No.
So this is a topic that I know that many people have commented on.
Yeah, they have.
So was this a conscious decision on both of your parts not to have children?
So we did try to have children. So I think fresh off getting married, I was a bit like, you know, my eating disorder was taking hold. What do I do next? Maybe I need a child. Maybe that'll fix my problems. So we tried. I think we tried for about 6 months. And then I remember saying to him, do you know what? I'm just not really into this. Like, I don't even know if I want one. And he said, you know, I married you, not your ovaries. He was like, I really do want a child with you, but it's not the be all and end all for me. Like, as long as I've got you, everything else is just, you know, a bonus.
Yes.
So I said, well, let's revisit this because, you know, I'm younger than you. And men can have babies forever. I've got a bit more time on the clock. So let's just revisit it. And we've never really discussed it since. And I'm definitely at that age now where I think, oh, dear me. And every time I meet people in my age bracket, they go, freeze your eggs. You should freeze your eggs. I don't know if... One thing me and him did have in common is that we were both kind of fat kids. And we both always joke, you know, God, if we had kids, they'd be burdened with all of our ailments, basically. Of, you know, not liking their body and not having a slow metabolism and I'm joking about it because I now know that that's not important, but
Right.
it's our little joke to each other that kind of gets us off the hook.
Right.
As if to say that's why we didn't do it, because we wouldn't be very good at it. And certainly I think now when he's so poorly, I don't know if I could be a mum right now and be a good mum because all my energy is on him. So any spare minute I've got, it's focused on what's going on with him.
Right.
I'm sure I could be a good mum. But do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Even my dog is staying with my mum at the minute because I haven't got the capacity for a little fluffy white Maltese terrier.
Yeah.
So I suppose you deal with it, don't you? You just deal with your lot.
Yeah, you do. You do. You know, one area too that I want to talk about, but we'll go as deep or not as deep as you want to talk about is John in particular. What's going on now?
Yeah.
Right. Because you've alluded to this in the conversation.
Yep.
So John is not well.
Yeah. So he's had cancer. He had cancer, esophageal cancer, which he had chemotherapy for and had an operation to remove. They took out all his stomach. They made him a new stomach.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big operation. Then he was cancer-free, effectively, in remission. And then they discovered that he had adrenal cancer. But the adrenal gland is like hormone, it controls all your hormones in your body. Okay. And this was a bit trickier because it meant that they couldn't necessarily just go in and rip it out. So they kind of said, you're going to be living with cancer and we're just going to give you chemotherapy and radiotherapy and we're going to manage it. And then in the midst of all this, he got diagnosed with a brain tumour, a little tumour on the back of his brain, which they took out with cyberknife, then got rid of. So I was like, there's something about you, but you're like, they just can't, you know, you're going to just live forever. And that was all hunky-dory. And then about January, February of this year, he went to chemotherapy on his own. And there's a huge guilt around him going to chemo on his own. if I'm working or doing anything. There's a real, it makes me sad. But he'd gone on his own, and he got there and he fell down the stairs in the hospital. And he fell down the stairs, landed onto the lap of a nurse, and she got him cleaned up, and he'd really gashed his legs. And these wounds just wouldn't heal because of the chemotherapy treatment. His body just couldn't heal these wounds. And this is what the source of the infection that's currently put him in hospital.
Okay.
And I thought he'd be in for a few days and they'd sort him out, give him a load of antibiotics, and he'd be home. And he's been in a month now. And his infection levels just weren't coming down. There's been days where he's got no idea. He knows who I am, but he's talking absolute gobbledygook. It's pretty scary. And weirdly, he's using food to control his situation there. So he stopped eating. And I asked him, why are you not eating? And he was like, because it's the only thing I can control. So I'm watching someone, pretty much fade away in front of my eyes. And it took maybe I think last week was the week where I really had to kind of get a grip and think, hang on, he's not getting this. That if he doesn't start eating, and he's not going to get out of here alive. And we kind of had that chat. And in the last 3 days, there's been a marked improvement. So I've seen, I don't think I would have been able to come chat to you today had that not happened. But it's happened. So I'm like, God for that.
Yes.
And I can, we're talking to the doctors about getting him home and stuff. But that is really, for me, I just thought cancer and this is how people die. But actually a lot of the issues with his cancer are nothing to do with the cancer. It's all the other things that come with it that I just wasn't prepared for. And I've struggled with it because it felt so fast as well. Like, we woke up one morning with a sore knee. The infection had spread to his knee and he couldn't walk. So I called an ambulance, like you do. And they came and took him and, I thought, I'll pack a few things in his bag, because he might have to stay overnight.
But he'll be
I was so naive to what was actually playing out in front of me. So to see him really like losing lots of weight, he didn't have any weight to lose. It's been tricky for me because I've thought, I'm failing him here. And he's always looked after me, always cared for me. And now it's my turn to repay the favour and step up. And we don't live near any family or friends. So it really is just me and one-man band. And it's been a lot, actually, because I've kind of thought I could maybe not mention this online, but I found quite a lot of comfort chatting about it. Because I've been coming home at night from the hospital with a glass of wine and a piece of cheese because I couldn't be bothered to make my dinner. And my friends obviously rang me and stuff. But then what do? You sit on your phone, don't you? I'm too distracted to go and watch a film or read a book. So I've just been on my phone chatting to people, and the comfort that's brought me. Instagram, TikTok, all these platforms get a bad rep for being a place of negativity or, creating false narratives. For me, it's been quite the opposite. That's where I found the best advice, where I found a lot of maternal people wanting to just take care of me, give me good ideas. I've really got a source of support there that I've not got anywhere else. So it's been a bit of a saving grace, to be honest.
Yeah, that's incredible. I have never heard someone position social media in that way,
Yeah.
but I can see how it is. It's been incredible for you.
Oh, I mean, in every instance I've been on that platform, it's been the opposite of what people say. My mum made a good point to me when I told her I was coming to see you, and we was like, what we're going to talk about, I don't know. And she said, if you do talk about social media, you should always remember how when I first went on Instagram and I was so scared of putting on weight because there's that control, I would use editing apps to edit my body. And she said that saved my life because she said you didn't have to starve yourself. You could just make it a bit skinnier. And it's so unhealthy that we know now that that's a really bad thing to do, and I had to stop that. And I'm sure lots of girls have done this where they've tweaked their face or, snatched their waistline. And again, that's a really negative thing to do. But actually, in that period, Mum says if you didn't have that, I worry for you.
Yes.
Because you would have had to do it physically.
Yes.
And you would have been really poorly.
Yeah.
Because you were just so dysmorphic that you couldn't see how small you were.
Absolutely.
So there's been lots of instances through social media where you'd think, oh, that would be a bad thing, but actually it's been a good thing for me.
But it's been helpful.
Yeah.
So what have you learned through social media that's been helpful with you managing John not being home in the moment?
Really practical stuff. So, every time I'll go online, I'll just be honest and say, this is what's gone on. And people will message, well, I've had this, did you try that? I mean, proper practical advice has been great. But also just words of encouragement and me maybe feeling a bit low and other people sensing that and just saying, you're doing all right. You need it. Like sometimes it's not enough to just come from your mom or from family. You need that validation from people that you don't know so well. Or I do anyway. And it's made me it's made me well up a few times this week when I've read messages. I thought, oh my God, they're going to set me off. Yeah. Because there's a lot of love there. And I think the story that I'm going through is quite common. So this isn't, it's not a unique, we're not a unicorn couple where no one else has been through this. So many people have been through this trauma.
This is in particular why I wanted to have this conversation with you.
Okay.
Because this also blew my mind. 1 in 2 people in the UK will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime.
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because I cannot think of anyone in my close circle where cancer has not impacted or touched us.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yep.
And to your point is it feels like it all happens very quickly.
It's felt so fast.
Yeah.
And it's like having the rug pulled from under you. Life's all just going a bit too good. I always used to say, I feel like, when I met John, I feel like the bubble's going to burst. And the bubble burst the day he got his cancer diagnosis. And he changed as a person when he had his operation. When he had his esophagus and his stomach removed, I felt like they took a piece of him away that he's never really got back because he had to relearn to eat and relearn, a new lifestyle. And listen, I know I had an eating disorder, but our love language was going out. And that's just been taken away. We've been robbed of it because he can't do those things in an enjoyable way. So he's really been... I feel like he's had a lot of his enjoyment stolen from him, and yet he's still determined to show up and turn up. And he did say in the hospital to me, even yesterday, I don't think I would have kept fighting if I'd not had you coming to see me every day, almost like I was doing him a favour. And I was like, of course I'm going to come see you every day. What are you talking about? Yeah. And yeah, it's so sad. It's so frustrating. There's so many emotions you go through.
Yes. My father-in-law passed away due to cancer. And the feeling that I had that came over me was how unfair I felt it was for my wife.
Yeah.
And unfair it was for his wife, and it was unfair to the point where I felt angry. Because it felt so unfair, like we were being robbed.
Yeah, I've had those feelings.
Yeah.
On his behalf as well. I think selfishly, I've had that feeling of, it's affecting my life and my quality of my life, but that's very fleeting. But also just how persistent it is, it invades every day of our lives, and it wears you down after a while. Because it's not like you get a cold and you recover after a couple of weeks. This is years and years of him going through chemotherapy and, how that impacts you as a person. And certainly there's been moments where he said, I don't feel like I'm the man you married and therefore I'm letting you down because this isn't what you bought into.
Yeah.
And his confidence levels have impacted. His speech has changed. So there's the physicality of him has changed. And that's just so frustrating for me on his behalf. I'm like, it's not fair. Yeah. You don't deserve to go through all that.
Yeah. What has this moment in your life taught you about you?
Probably that I can pretty much get through anything now, I think. Because some days I get home from the hospital and I think, flipping it, this is quite full on. And I'm still turning up every day to work. I'm still running a business. I've got 3 brands that I run at the minute. So I'm still working and showing up for him as best I can. But I've got a great support network around me. So it's really made me understand the power of community in my own little network as well as the greater community of social media.
Yes, right.
But they do say, don't they, be careful what you share because once you open it, you can't take it back. And certainly with John, like now that people know about him, they are waiting for an update. And if they don't hear one, they're like, what's going on? Because they're invested in this story of this man that's really poorly. And it's up to me now to keep delivering the updates. Yeah. And that's quite a pressure.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, you must feel that pressure. Even looking at the posts about John, you see the engagement levels are sky high.
Yeah, they love him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get it, he's great. But I feel a huge pressure to keep people informed and also not to be disrespectful to other people that are going through cancer or scare people, no scaremongering. And it can be quite triggering. And I like positivity. It's a safe space, my socials.
Yes.
So I have to protect the people that are following as well as I have to protect John.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And what about marriage? What does it taught you about marriage? Because he feels pressure.
Yeah, he does.
You must feel pressure. So now there's this significant pressure that's being placed on the relationship.
Oh, massive pressure. I mean, our relationship isn't the same as what it was, but we've had an evolution of our relationship anyway. Yeah. It's never really stayed the same, but we've kind of grown with each other. So it's been all right because we've kept on the same level, even if we've changed slightly. We've changed in the same ways.
Yes.
But yeah, it's I think our marriage, it's taught me a lot about the power of being patient because he's so patient to me and always has been. And I've always been the, flighty, I can get a bit frustrated and then it's like, as soon as I vent, then I forget about it. I'm on to the next thing. Whereas he's just very calm and I think he enjoys me venting. But recently he's starting to vent because he's like, I can't do this. This is annoying. And I'm having to be patient and be like, listen, it's all right. We're going to get through this together. It's fine.
Yes.
So it's taught me a lot about, the other side of the coin, being more like John. Because that's what he needs right now.
Yes. The roles have reversed.
Yeah, they've really reversed.
Yeah. Yeah. I am, it's interesting. So I'd like your opinion on this. So there is a full study. This is around terminal illness. And the study shows that in marriages, when the woman has a terminal illness, that men leave at very high rates. However, if you look at, and these are heteronormative relationships, when it's the man who has the terminal illness, the woman almost always stays.
Yeah.
Supports and nurtures her husband. Why do you believe that is? Why do you believe there's that disparity?
I feel like from my own personal perspective,
Yes,
that wouldn't happen. If I got super poorly, John would be like there sorting it all out. But John's very emotional and very, has a lot of feminine traits in a way. So maybe it is just a kind of masculine need to provide as opposed to nurture. And it's almost like, well, this person isn't going to, fulfill me in that need to provide.
yes.
And therefore I need to go find somewhere else that can. Whereas as a woman, we don't really need that. That's not what gets our rocks off, is it? I feel like as women, we take a lot of solace from being loved and, feeling connection.
Yes.
And actually, when your husband's poorly, you feel a great deal of connection because they truly rely on you then. And John's never told me so much how much he loves me as what he has in the last month. Every time I see him, he reminds me of it. So he's giving me a lot of validation within our relationship right now. And that's how I would explain it.
We often devalue how inspirational our partners can and should be in our lives.
Yeah, like you've got to marry someone better than you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point?
You know what, Lauren? Can I say, I completely agree. I feel like you have to feel like you won.
Yeah.
Like you won the lottery with your
I do.
partner. Like, oh my gosh, how in the world did they?
Yeah, like why does he want me?
Yes.
Thank God he's not twigged yet. That I'm like imposter syndrome massively.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think that if you're on the other side of that, you're in the wrong relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The marriage started, you were still cabin crew. John is working.
He was in pensions for HSBC.
Oh wow, okay, pensions.
Yeah.
All right. So he's in finance, right?
Yeah.
You then essentially get on the path to what has now become a major business, a major brand,
Yeah.
right? I'm curious about how you and John worked together on that, because there's a similarity in my career and my wife and us working together in the early stages. And I was reliant on her.
Yeah.
I was reliant on her skill set. I was reliant on her financially
Mm-hmm.
early on. So what was the dynamic between you and John early in your current career?
I mean, it was as practical as he took my photographs that I would post on Instagram every day. And I would do all the back end, the replying to messages, the DMs and whatnot. But he was taking my photos. He was the guy that was saying, listen, can't really afford it, but let's put it on a credit card because you need that bag to be relevant if you're going to be this fashiony girl. So we got into debt. I'm not going to pretend we didn't. And I think we got into about 50 grand's worth of debt, spending on things like trips, places we would pay to go so we could create content
Interesting.
to kind of build, because I was so adamant that this was going to be a career for me. I was convinced of it. I just needed the opportunity, and he helped me pay for that.
But when you are 50 grand
Yeah.
in debt, what do you see that makes you believe you should keep going down that path?
Because every month that I kind of grew my community and slowly these money moments came in, partnerships and whatnot, the brand partnerships would get better. There was never a month where it went backwards. And so it was a bit of, he likes certainty, John does. He's the guy that's a bit more sensible than me. But he couldn't argue with the stats, which were that every month we're earning more money. So the trajectory is, why is this going to stop anytime soon?
Okay.
And we, as much as we were in debt, we could afford to pay off our credit cards each month. So I was like, as long as we can afford to pay off our credit cards, let's just keep going.
Interesting. And what you were doing at that point was, I would imagine, you're creating content.
Yeah.
You're posting that content online, and different companies are reaching out to do collaborations, partnerships with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it really, I think lockdown kind of helped me massively, because I had a nice community online before lockdown. I think I probably had about 500,000 followers. So a lot of people were, in my circle. But I'd never spoken on camera, or maybe I had once or twice, not really shown my face. People didn't know I was from Manchester or much about my background, because I quite liked it like that, because there's a vulnerability in sharing those things. But in lockdown, we couldn't leave our houses. And I was doing street style photography. That's what my content was. It was me stood in the street in an outfit. So I was like, what are we going to do here? And it was John that said, well, listen, every morning you get up and do your makeup and you sit chatting to me. Why don't you just film it?
Oh, well, that was his idea.
Yeah. He was like, instead of chatting to me, why don't you chat to them? And I was like, yeah, I suppose I could. And I just tried it out, and it kind of took off. And actually, my business to this day is built on storytelling, on stories.
Yeah.
So a lot of people on Instagram, it's all about the main grid, right?
Yes.
And that's where all the brand partners come from. But I mean, you got to pay me a lot of money to put something on main grid, because I'll avoid it like the plague.
Yes.
Because for me, that's my shop window.
Can I? All right, so this is another thing that's blowing my mind. So it was John's idea for you to sit,
Yeah.
do your makeup, and tell the story.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is, I would say, one of the most popular forms of content today.
It is, yeah.
In 2025.
But it wasn't then.
Yeah. So you had, because I'm thinking, did you originate this?
I don't think I did, but I saw an influx of content creators in the UK that emulated what I did very quickly after I did it, because they saw the success I was having. And I get it, because it was so raw. There was no preparation other than ordering a load of stuff online to use. So I would do, hauls. I'd just order bits of makeup, skincare, stuff I'd never tried before.
Sure.
And I think there's a naivety in us, let's unbox this together, let's try it together. I'd use it wrong and we'd giggle about it. I'd come on with no makeup and I didn't look that great. And I think there's a really nice thing to see somebody just not being so conscious of how they look.
Yes.
And not feeling so dolled up. And I don't have a telephone voice when I come online. I talk like I talk to my mates. And it was like a FaceTime with my mate. It was just, I never really think who's watching.
Okay.
If I did that, I'd be conscious of everything I said, and I'd be over filming and re-recording. So everything's one take. There's no over edits. Like, it's just, that's it. That's what I said.
But what about body image? Because it's something that you've struggled with throughout your life. So how conscious were you of how you were showing up with your body online?
I kind of was, but also because I was doing a lot of makeup stuff, that's just your face, isn't it? So I wasn't really focused on my body as much. But right at the beginning of me doing those tutorials, there was a lot of like face apps and stuff. And I remember using an app called Snow.
Okay.
And you could slightly, I remember like I slightly made my jaw a bit more narrow. And I quite liked how it looked. But then when I started getting offers for money for skincare and makeup, they'd had in the briefs, it would be like, you can't use any editing filters. And I think the government even made a decision on it as well. So I had to be like, right, I've got to scrap this. And I said to John, like, what am I going to do? And he was like, well, you don't look that much different. And so I just one day went on without the ad and no one commented. And I was like, no one's noticed. So it's only me that cared. So then I thought, yeah, sod it. Like, if they don't care, I don't care. And actually, the more swipe ups were on the ones where I looked a bit rough.
Wow.
If I looked too perfect, it wasn't as engaging.
Okay.
And so, and we spoke about it before, I like money. So I could see this was a financial decision for me.
Absolutely.
To be bare.
At what point did you feel like you were profitable?
Probably before lockdown, before the beauty.
Okay.
I think as soon as I started to create those fashion collections, they were really lucrative. And I realised that, John was like, this is crazy money. Like, you're earning in a month what I earn in a year. It's like, this is daft.
Yeah.
But then certainly beauty, there's so much more variety, right? And it's there's a lot of money in beauty as well.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of advertising. So it opened up lots of lovely doors.
Yeah. So around that time, then the collections you were creating, so you were partnering with.
Yeah, I partnered with a fashion brand.
With a fashion brand, okay.
And we would create, initially it was like one collection every 3 months. But I think the first collection sold out in the first day. And then so the next one we did again, and then they were really like fun to do as well. I loved it. And they gave me so much. They indulged my creativity. So they were like, if you can be as involved as you want or as non-involved.
Wow.
And I built this little team that I worked with there, and it was brilliant.
Yeah, it must have been a dream.
Yeah, it was a dream experience, and I'm so grateful to the people, that were behind that and let me do that. And I always knew I'm going to do this on my own at some point. But that was like risk-free, really, because I wasn't putting any money into it. And it was just a brilliant experience in terms of understanding my customer base, what they wanted. The back end was key.
Yes.
Because I could see what did well, because I answered my DMs, so I was getting the feedback. So I really used that as like market research. It was the best market research ever.
Oh my gosh. And you were making money.
I'm making money.
Can you disclose what a good month was for you?
I mean, I think at the height, I think 1 month I got paid just from that brand like 80 grand, which is a lot of money, isn't it?
That is a lot of money, Lorna. It's a lot.
That wasn't the standard. That was a one-off.
Oh, one-off, but still. So you continually built.
Yeah.
Currently, it's 3 brands that you're managing. So it's LA Space.
LA Space.
Ghost
by Lady A. And then 98 Beauty, which hasn't yet launched. And we've called it 98. We've called it Beauty because that was the only .com available. But fundamentally, 98 is gonna be an umbrella of products I love.
Okay.
That aren't clothes.
Oh, interesting. All right. So busy.
Yeah, very busy.
When you think about your community, which has truly, I think, been the linchpin around your success, it's been your community. What do you believe is most misunderstood or even least known about you?
What I do, I come on every day, right, and chat. So I feel like if there was a fakeness in anything I was doing, they would have seen that by now, because I don't think I couldn't have kept up the facade.
Right.
So the fundamentals of who I am, people do definitely know. But the general day-to-day of my life, because they only get that small snippet, they probably don't see a lot of the worries that I have, and just generally things that panic me, because they're not things I talk about. Whether it be, obviously John, they know, but certainly work stuff.
When you think about your career, what do you believe is the biggest misconception about it?
That me and John started with loads of cash, because we didn't really. We just got into loads of debt. We pretended. We basically, I'm definitely that girl that fake it till you make it. And I think most people think, John's a rich guy and that's why they've got all that nice stuff. But fundamentally, John and I together are successful and that's why we've got all that nice stuff. It's not more, all right, I'm the front-facing person, but he's my business partner and co-founder of all my brands and equal decision-making and very involved in every element.
It seems like you had to sell a lifestyle in order to then live the lifestyle.
Yeah, I did. And that is exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I reversed engineered my own living, if you like.
Yes. I just recently started following you.
Yeah.
And I noticed that so many of the people that I admire and respect that I'm also following
Okay.
are following you and engaging your content. That's almost a litmus test on how I can tell how well I'm going to like someone.
Really?
Is based on those that I respect. Whether or not only do they follow you, but I see that they engage in your content.
Yeah.
So they look up to you. And to me, I always look at that as an endorsement of how similar the values I'll have with someone.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Because I think that in essence, that's what we do, is that we end up becoming close and highly admire and highly respect people who share our values, because our values are like our rule book to life.
Yeah. And you do have to edit whose content you consume, because if you find yourself in a hole of following people that are quite negative or maybe have strange values, you start to make it okay. You start to make it passable and plausible.
Yes.
And before you know it, you've ended up with completely different morals and views.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And that's why how we were grounded, how we were taught early on, that's why that's so important. Are you proud of yourself?
Yeah, I am proud, but there's always more you can do, right? I think that I need John to get through this blip. I feel a great weight on me with this. I can't drop the ball on this one. So I need to really do him proud now.
All right, so can I hit you with the last question
Go on.
that everybody gets?
Go for it.
All right, it's my favorite question.
Yeah.
And that is, you've had some incredible experiences and conversations in your life.
Yeah.
When you think about the most memorable, who was it with and what did you learn?
Probably the most memorable conversation was that conversation after the Priory with John. Because I was willing at that point to walk away from a marriage that provided me with everything. Because I felt so passionate that this wasn't what was right for me. And that takes a lot of guts, I think, to kind of be willing to risk everything.
Yes.
That at that point, when I was at my lowest, I was still fighting for myself. I was still advocating for myself and going, no, that is not right for me. And you do have to be an advocate for yourself sometimes, even when you're at your lowest. You can't always rely on other people. And that gut of going, no, this is not right for me, and I'm really sorry, but this is not going to happen. And it is a hard conversation to have because everyone is around John saying, no, she needs this. Like, she's not well, she's a bit delulu. She really needs to be institutionalized. And the ability for me to have that one chat with him and him go, right, I'm going to do what you want to do because I love you enough that my marriage is more important than anything else.
Wow.
And it kind of set the foundations for our entire trajectory of our relationship. And probably the reason why it's lasted. So yeah, that was a big deal, I think, that moment.
Yeah, that one hit me because I think there are many people who would have not made the decision that he made.
No, I think most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
But that's John.
Yeah, there he goes. You know, the commonality is you both walk to the unbeaten path.
Yeah, we do. You're right.
You know, and what's beautiful is you do it together.
We do. Yeah.
And you found your person. You know, I think that is something that I am so happy for you about, and why I wish John all the best in the world. It's been wonderful.
It's been like the best therapy. Feel like a weight lifted.
Yeah. You know, for me, it has been insightful.
Good. In what way?
You know, I see you differently than who I saw on Instagram.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you know what's so hard about social media is it's so one dimensional,
So one-dimensional.
you know, and you don't get the richness of the individual, the humbleness, you know, the insightfulness. I see like, you know, I see you as someone you're stoic,
I am a little bit.
but at the same time, you're frail.
Yeah, at the minute I'm very frail in the sense of everything going on around.
Yeah. But you know, you see how you live between those two places. This is life.
Mm.
I think in life we're constantly navigating between, you know, certainty and uncertainty,
Yeah.
strength and weakness. But on social, we only show up as what? Strong, we're certain,
Yeah.
you
It's
know.
so true.
But in actuality, you know, we're living between both.
Yeah, we really are.
Yeah. And that's what I saw today.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. When John is super, super better, you and John have an invite to Sutton United.
To the footy.
Yes.
Well, he'll love that.
Oh my gosh.
I will be like, where's the wine? Where's the bar?
No, we don't have wine. We have pints.
Yeah, I know.
Wine.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
I'll bring my own. I'll bring my own bottle of rosé.
Yeah, of course you will.
Lorna Luxe.
Lorna Luxe. That was wild.
What did you think?
Oh my gosh, I love her. From one lens, you can say she's on top of the world. She's managing 3 brands. She's lives in this incredible house, right? But yet there's so much pain and struggle and turmoil that's happening in her life. She is human. She, even to this day, doesn't classify herself as anything. And to me, more and more, this is a lesson that I'm taking, is I think that we in society, we've gotten ourselves into trouble by trying to fit everyone into a nice little box. And that is incredibly dangerous, I believe. And Lorna, like many of our guests, are proving that you can live outside of the box. It's much healthier to do so. Lorna is going through a very difficult time with John being in the hospital currently, you know, as we record. And you can see that she's trying to hold it together. She's trying to be what John has been throughout her life. She's trying to be the rock for him. She's being forced to evolve into another version of herself. And what I'm finding more and more with the conversations that I'm having with the guests is that that's what life does. It forces you to have to evolve to a better version of yourself. And right when you get to that version, you think you're at your best self, life throws something else at you quickly, and then you're forced to evolve again. And it's interesting because Lorna is child-free. But there's a massive lesson for those who have children from this conversation. And that is that your decisions, whether or not you realize it, carry consequence for your children. Jill is super nerd. I mean, Jill has the DSM-5, right? The Diagnostic Statistical Manual on Mental Disorders. And she just reads it for fun. That's my wife, right? and eating disorders are right in there, you know, and looking at how prevalent they are among people who have suffered trauma early in their life, you can't discount that our adolescents are incredibly important. Secondly is, if you don't yet have a child and you're considering whether or not, parenting's not for everyone. It's just not. And we shouldn't let society shame us, especially women, into this idea that you must have a child, and if you don't, you're insufficient, or you have lower value. And you can see how Lorna was able to fight through that stigma, and I think that's a lesson that we can all take. Are you ready? That's probably too much. Let me see. How about everyone? Oh my God. Sheffield. Scott, how do you say this? Is it
Sheffield.
Sheffield. Man, at least this isn't live, right?
Wow, no, but that's about to change, isn't it?
So we are going to do We Need to Talk live for the first time. The magic is in the conversation, so we'll have a very special guest. You know what's probably most cool about this is this will be the first time that the We Need to Talk community will come together in person. You know, I'm curious to see, what does everyone look like? What do they smell like? Sheffield, July 5th at the Crucible Theater. So to get tickets, very simple. It's crossedwires.live. It's very important to buy tickets quickly because they will go fast. We'll make sure that there's a link below.